How did the ring get from Nixon to Laura Palmer?
Mike.
Nelson?
No. He's dead. Bobby shot him.
Oh, that's right.
So you've seen everything. Tyler's seeing it as you go, and Dave's like somewhere in between, right? It's a good dynamic. The fact that Tyler hasn't seen it all,
Right. That's
like,
what was the.
That's really our gimmick. That's that's the whole hook.
Tyler's like back. He's like, "Oh, did we all get our beers? No, we haven't even left yet."
Beginning of the book, I mean, you've got the introduction to the ring, you've got the introduction to the concept of abductions or crazy experiences in the woods, and as the story moves forward, he dies and the ring is stolen, arguably, and disappears into history, and then the ring doesn't show up again until like the 50s. It's like way later.
Yeah,
in the book.
A long gap, yeah.
In the book. I hate to keep plugging my stuff, but now that
Please do.
my first episode on the Owl Cave Ring, I break through chronologically every single appearance, including the book. So the first appearance is the Lewis and Clark stuff all the way to the end of the return. Every time that I've found its mentioned or appearance, I lay all of that out. I can't even remember when it appears, but I know I did a video on it. Right now.
And it's great.
Everybody go watch it. Right now, we'll wait.
Unless you haven't seen The Return.
Unless you haven't seen The Return.
Oh, damn it.
Tyler.
I'm not going to go watch it.
I guess that's a spoiler.
It's a lot like Lynch's work. I haven't read enough other Mark Frost books to know if how much of it is just him writing this way, but like
This is the written equivalent of a phone cord. Down and down forever.
There's a moment where he's supposedly mentally kind of coming unraveled, and there's a part where he's in his house and he's described by his, I think, housekeeper as pacing back and forth around the room like a lawyer. And I thought that was a very interesting choice of words considering what happens later in the series. We discussed this almost at length about Leland and his vulnerability to the spirits.
Yeah.
But it's almost like the ring is kind of guided or seeks out people of a certain character. You have to have these innate qualities to be kind of targeted by whatever this is. And so while he wasn't a lawyer, the fact that he carried himself in such a way that somebody looked at him and described him as a lawyer really stood out to me. Like, how many kinds of people has this ring changed hands to that fit this description?
That's just the thing too. That's just it's one word. You know, it's like it's one word that just stuck out, and you know.
Exactly.
It was in the middle of a lot of history lessons still, like, and a lot of just like storytelling that I wasn't clicking with until I heard that word. And I kind of perked up and ran it back in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Like, hold on, who are we talking about?
There's one little newspaper clipping article about a skeleton that was found. Some stuff is super loose, and that's just me like speculating like, oh, giant skeleton of a giant human. Where are there giants in Twin Peaks? Before the Native Americans as we know it, I don't know if you guys know anything about the mound builders, like 5,000 years ago, as opposed to the ones that we know from like a few hundred years ago. But they found a skeleton and it was huge. It was a giant skull with a giant body or whatever. And this is just one little tiny newspaper clipping that's in the middle of all of this somewhere. And to me, that's like the giant.
Right.
Maybe the giant is a spirit or somehow tied to these ancient, whatever, early 1900 they found a skeleton of, that Mark Frost found this newspaper clipping of. I don't know if I'm talking too much or just...
No, this is this is legit perfect.
How much of a geek I am. So I went through and I outlined the whole
Holy cow.
book. No, I did this like 2 years ago, or like last year.
Okay.
Like,
I would have you send me that if I
You
knew
did it just for us.
I really appreciate that.
it's a little heady. Like, I think I put a little too much detail in it, but you can see, like, it opens with the FBI memos. Then the Lewis and Clark thing is kind of part one. The Nez Perce history is part two. Town of Twin Peaks starts with Owl Cave and logging mania and Andrew Packard and Douglas Milford. And then you've got your lights in the sky UFO stuff.
It's top secret document.
My personal goal is to either find it or sit down and index this whole thing so you can find, like, oh, UFOs are on these 3 pages. Cool.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Be a lot of work.
Yes, that's why I haven't done it yet, because fuck that. Chief Joseph and Liver Eaton Johnson, also known as Jeremiah Johnson. This is a TP annotation, and this is true. After the surrender of Chief Joseph, Johnson told Captain Ernest Wood that because of the Army's treatment of the Nez Perce, there would one day, quote, come a reckoning.
I want to walk it back just a little bit to Chief Joseph was leading his people away from battle and somehow found a way to go seemingly through the mountains after having a meeting with what he calls a sky person or a spirit. So for them to come back after this apparent friendship with whatever this spirit presence is around the area and say there will be a reckoning, if you take it as historical canon, that did happen. And he's like, you don't know who we're friends with. Like, this is going to come back on you.
Yeah.
It's not going to be us.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Because we would never do anything like that.
Yeah.
But we know people. I'm assuming he's related to Leo.
Oh, Liver Eating Johnson?
Liver
Eating Johnson.
I love
Sure.
it.
Now, I'm pretty sure Jeremiah Johnson was an actual person who existed, shoehorned into this tale.
No.
Right, you don't know how many Leo fans there are.
I do
3,
not.
and I'm one of them.
You like season 1 Leo or you like New Shoes Leo?
New Shoes Leo, obviously.
New Shoes.
And Firewalk with me, Leo.
Scrubbing the floor Leo?
This is where we live, Shelley!
Later, TP confirms that someone, I forgot who it was, with the last name Palmer has no relation to the Palmer family. She doesn't make a note.
Yeah, she doesn't say
it's
that.
Not related to Leo.
That's why I thought that. I think that's canon.
Let's talk about the Owl Cave.
Yeah.
Well, Owl Cave is a cave.
I've heard of that.
If you're looking chronologically in history, this is when white people show up in the town. It's becoming a town in the logging and the industry and the Packards and that kind of thing.
The guys that found it, Denver Bob and Wayne Chance. I just loved that it was, of course, a guy named Bob. Yeah, he disappeared. Yeah, and the other guy was Wayne Chance, as in one chance out.
One chance out between 2 worlds.
Wayne Chance wrote the journal entry. You see Denver Bob's name like 20 times. The one guy saying Denver Bob did this, then Denver Bob disappeared, then Denver Bob.
Yeah.
It's cool because you've got the graphic that we know and love of the Owl Cave painting in that guy's journal.
I just picture Andy just drawing that on that chalkboard.
It's a map.
It's a map.
There's an archivist note about how the Denver Bob journal was found in the basement of a Masonic temple. The archivist says, interesting that it was found in the Masonic temple because the Masons' enemy is the Illuminati and the Illuminati symbol is the owl. Again, does this pan out in Twin Peaks as a whole? Not really, but it's like another sub layer of the kind of stuff that Frost is into, whatever you want to call it, good versus evil or democracy versus authoritarianism versus...
I think it's definitely a dichotomy, and this comes up all through this book. So if you're going with the Illuminati and the Masonic Lodge as the sort of at-odds lodges, where one is more spiritual and one is more based in fact and reason, and that's really a running theme through this entire book. Like, it's always, you're presented with one thing that seems very outlandish and spiritual, and then that's immediately countered by something based in reality or something scientific. I mean, it keeps going. So the Packards and the Martells are in the area now, and they've both started their logging businesses, and then everything just catches on fire.
Fire.
It's funny how history repeats itself too, what we know in the show with all the fires. And...
Right. Fire also very much at the forefront.
Of course, yeah, well, Fire walk with me.
But yeah, you got people wondering if this was, an arson, or if it was an accident, or if it's straight up a curse that Like they finally, this is our reckoning. Like it's always that constant, battle between reason and the spirit. It's definitely cool.
I think, Patrick, you're the one that mentioned this to me about his death, the moonlight, not being a moon that night, and then we got on the discussion about the White Lodge, how Briggs was, that white light that showed up when he disappeared. Is that like something? I guess the same thing that happened. Confirm that for me.
Verified. TP.
I think it's the exact same thing that happens to the campers or the kids on their day out. It's Margaret Letterman, Carl Rod, and
a third person,
a third individual,
who has since passed. Remember, there were three.
But I think you're right. Context would suggest that Meriwether Lewis, Chief Joseph, the three kids, Packard, and Major Briggs. These are all in the woods of Twin Peaks. And
Milford. That's where he got the branding. So then wouldn't Packard have those same branding or scars or whatever?
Well, he mentions having a similar experience. Because I think it's Dougie Milford, I think, comes to him and says, like, hey, this happened to me. It was crazy for him to say, like, I actually experienced something similar. So you have a private page of a diary from Andy Packard. Hey, they didn't tell you about this part. Like they wanted it to sound more reasonable, but no, this was bananas.
Still waiting on the Secret Diary of Andrew Packard release.
I've got it on pre-order.
Is he the one that was talking about the giant owl, or was that Milford? I thought it was the Boy Scouts. It looked like a 4-foot owl or something like that.
There's that statue too. That's at like Bohemian Grove.
Well, the owl
of it.
Yeah, you're getting off track, Patrick.
I know. I know.
I think some people have like encounters or weird stuff happens to them, but then those 5 or 6 people I mentioned, like Briggs from the show, like in the woods of Twin Peaks, flash of light and disappears for an indeterminate amount of time.
I know that's jumping ahead, but I mean, Carl Rod, like that one line, this book makes
blew my mind.
So much more.
That actually blew my mind. So my theory about it was that he had like slipped a little bit in between the trailer park and the Black Lodge, thinking that was a portal for it, and just going like, whoa, I don't belong here. And I got to know he was abducted. He's already gone places.
Already gone places.
How much of this book is retconned? How much of it is stuff that was in Frost's mind, even maybe Lynch from way back? That's one of the like cruxes of this book, is squaring that circle, so to speak. Carl Rod, for example, like that's a retcon thing. I believe Carl Rod is solely a David Lynch and Robert Ingalls creation.
Even with The Ring. I mean, it's funny how much The Ring is in this book. It's like that was a Fire Walk With Me thing, which Frost wasn't part of.
Part of the return and this book was for Frost to work things in from Fire Walk With Me that weren't his and make them his own and part of their new story that they created. Again, David Lynch hasn't read this book, and this is all Mark Frost. Like, certainly lots of this was discussed in the genesis of the return. Carl Rod and The Ring, I think, are like the two big things from Fire Walk With Me. Because I read this book, it was like, okay, cool, like Frost and Lynch are incorporating like the whole world. The show and Fire Walk With Me are all going to be
well, that was the thing too. There was that quote that came out with David Lynch before the return, how he said it was like an essential part. Like Fire Walk With Me, you couldn't just gloss over it, basically. It was like, I mean, this book just sort of says that as well.
It's the best goddamn coffee you're going to get anywhere, buddy.
The other thing I have on my list of questions for you guys is, did you notice the inconsistencies between the show and the book?
I couldn't tell you what they are, but when I heard them, I was like, what? Pete plays checkers, not chess. I'm pretty sure 8 episodes relied on Pete playing chess.
Yes.
I found a quote from Mark Frost. He talks a little bit about it, and he just says that, he purposefully decided for the book to be a dossier of documents from various people. He purposely put, typos or statements that seem untrue because his reasoning was being that actual historical documents are presented this way with inconsistencies and inaccuracies. Because if you're writing down something too, like word of mouth or it travels, you could easily be like, oh, he played, you might have heard Pete played chess, but in your head it's stuck as checkers.
I don't know. That's a pretty big one to get wrong.
He said, in life you have to learn to live with paradoxes, and sometimes what we think we know isn't what actually happened. Sometimes what we think really happened isn't something that we actually know, and sometimes things will be revealed further down the line that will help clarify all those things.
That's true about history. Pick any topic of history that you're interested in and do a deep dive of research. You will find inconsistencies of documents and recollections and et cetera, even photographs. He's right about history, but that second quote is more important. History works this way, memory works this way. And what he just said about what we think we know, maybe we don't.
I also wonder too if some of this was just a nod to the other books having the inconsistencies as well. Just being like, well, these already have, like the Secret Diary does, the Cooper one certainly does because he goes to Deer Meadow,
Did Mark Frost write the other books?
No. Who wrote the Dale Cooper autobiography?
His brother.
His brothers,
Scott.
yeah. Scott.
Jennifer Lynch wrote the Laura Palmer Diary, and Frost wrote these new 2 books.
And another writer wrote the Access Guide to the Town, right? I showed these guys your episodes about the town of Twin Peaks. I think it's in that book they talk about the log lady's log being ponderosa pine.
Yeah.
In this book, it's Douglas fir.
Yes, correct.
Yeah, that's one of them, yeah.
Wouldn't it be Douglas fir?
Right? Why wouldn't it be?
Big, majestic.
There were other little, I think, minor things.
Yeah.
That my ears would just perk up.
Yeah.
That's not how
I'm not good with dates. I know there are some actual timeline inconsistencies as far as when events happen. But the only one that I caught when Major Briggs gets the printout that has Cooper, and he was saying that he got that after the case had been closed, and then he took it to him to show him what was going on. But it was actually during, while the investigation was ongoing.
Why even try to get away with that?
Why?
There's no point in saying that happened after. What is
one
the
of
benefit?
One of the big sore
that?
thumb too was Josie's death being 10 days before it happened. It would have lined up with Leland dying, I think.
I, first of all, took 2 months to watch the first season. And then, so my concept of time is already messed up because of that. And then the fact that 2 seasons take place over 2 weeks, further fucks up my time.
Yeah.
So did she die at the same time as Leland? I don't. If you told me that, I would absolutely believe you.
Yeah. And I feel too, he expects the hardcore fans to sit here, and he knows they're going to sit here and dissect this thing and pull it apart and literally line it up with the timeline that they've been given.
And then rip it apart?
Did this happen this date? Did this happen this date? Yeah.
Why?
Between two worlds, again, constant theme in Twin Peaks, but the logic versus spiritual. So you mentioned earlier Jacoby and the left and right side of the brain. It's another example, and he goes into how Nadine is blinded in one eye, which has screwed up her balance. You've also got the 2 Milford brothers. Dwayne is a hardcore liberal, the mayor, liberal Democrat. Douglas Milford, who's the star of this book, is traditionally more conservative. There's always this clash of ideas. There's always 2 lodges or 2 schools of thought that are in conflict.
So Doug Milford himself, who is the closet badass of this book, even being a very conservative or Republican-minded individual, he takes on the study of UFOs and strange encounters. He really goes X-Files when he's trying to find an answer for the things he's experienced, because he's not finding it spiritually. He wants to find a way to reason through it. So even in himself, he's got that clash.
How great is it that they gave such a minor season 2 character this amazing backstory?
I think it's easier to do with somebody who they didn't give you a lot of before.
Yeah, he was.
It was infuriating.
Yeah.
I need a whole series based on this guy's life. As much as I love the mayor, his brother rocks.
Dougie Milford is the Agent Cooper of
of his time.
Yeah.
If this book totally existed on its own, Dougie Milford is that cool FBI agent that's figuring all this stuff out. He's long dead, and you are reading Agent TP, who is annotating the archivist's expanded research of super badass Agent Dougie Milford's story. Even like that kind of realization didn't even hit me till maybe the second read through. It was like, oh my god, this is actually about Dougie Milford.
It takes some exposure to really let it all sink in. I realized he was a huge part of what this book was covering, but it took the second listen through to just be like, he's the glue for everything. He's the Fox Mulder out there kicking in doors and asking questions that nobody else is asking, getting the answers that nobody wants to give him. It's really cool. All these stories come from him.
Yeah.
And you get no semblance of that from the show.
Oh no,
it's ridiculous. And
the guy gets killed with sex. You loved the dispute between brothers, so you're getting your Milford backstory here.
It's true. It's true. What was the significance of his receipt from buying the car and the whole thing with his car? I just remember it because they talk about it, and then some more dialogue happens, and then it's referenced like, here was a receipt for the car he bought. TP.
Verified. TP.
Verified, this is a car.
for the Buick Roadmaster?
Actually, I don't know. I believe a 1947 Buick Roadmaster appears in the Return at some point. Or it's in the original show. But it's one of those obscure...
Yeah.
I think this Buick Roadmaster shows up somewhere else.
That wasn't the car that Evelyn Marsh's husband crashed, was it?
You know what? There's a whole thing about cars in Twin Peaks, and I don't know nothing about them.
Verified.
This whole section, these multiple sections of all these investigations and eyewitness reports and the stuff about Milford himself kind of getting shadowed, followed around for looking into them. I think this is just a way to not pad the book, but it's stuff that kind of over-explains what it is he's up to. It shows almost his entire career as this X-Files style investigator of these situations. There are a couple of talking points, but overall it's a little repetitive for me.
Yeah, I agree.
I think so too, yeah.
It's a lot of conversations that kind of go in circles and don't resolve. I can't remember the specifics of it, but there's mention of 3 tramps.
3 what?
Tramps. So, or
homeless people.
Vagrants, homelesses, yeah. Homelesses.
Hobos.
Yeah, hobos, sure. And this seems to be a recurring theme just throughout the Twin Peaks history as well. Or not the history necessarily, but the timeline. Even if there's just a passing reference or it's just in the background, tramps are everywhere. There's even one of the lodge spirits looks like a homeless guy from the meeting. It's one more thing. The only thing that would have made it more Twin Peaks is if it was 2 tramps instead of 3. Just these little things that are peppered in there, and the mention of the 3 tramps stood out to me on my listening through. Because I kind of mentally dog-eared that. I was like, homeless people, that's a thing.
The 3 tramps in Dealey Plaza is a Kennedy thing, which that Cooper's into the Kennedy assassination.
Yeah.
Who really pulled the trigger on JFK?
Some stuff, like you said, I agree. It's kind of just in there to be there, just to help tie stuff together. Someone should look this up, and I'm sure I'm misquoting it. I think Lynch on Lynch, the book, or one of his old interviews, I think he had a traumatic experience when he was young. He might have been accosted or had a weird encounter with, but I don't think that David Lynch looks down on homeless people and people's suffering. I think that people in ragged clothes covered in dirt scared the shit out of him one time.
Yeah.
And this is revisited in Mulholland Drive. So, fellas, Mulholland Drive has a scene in it, and it's the scariest scene that's ever been made in a movie ever. And
I am sold.
I saw that opening weekend in the movie theaters in 2001, whenever it came out. It scared the absolute shit out of me. And I watched it again like 3 or 4 months ago. It's the scariest thing I've ever it's just about mood. It's not particularly gross. It's not a jump scare per se. It's the scariest 5 minutes I've ever seen in any movie ever. And that's been true for 20 years now.
Yeah.
Noted.
It revolves around a tramp. There you go.
There's definitely a lot of recurring themes in Lynch's work.
The guys you're talking about in the convenience store meeting.
And the one that shows up in the trailer with Carl Rod and Chip Desmond. Yeah. That's what reminds me of what you're referencing in Mulholland Drive.
Absolutely. And the camera move into the trailer. I believe there's historical record of somebody noticing 3 people that were homeless in the area before Kennedy was killed. Yeah. However, I don't think you're wrong for that to pop out in your mind. That may be a Frost nod to Lynch's use of that type of character. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah, maybe pop that in there with the idea that one day David Lynch will read it and he'll get there and just go, oh.
Yeah.
Damn! You didn't tell me there were going to be tramps.
He did tell him, and that's why he hasn't read it.
And that's canon.
That's canon. Boom.
I think you're right when you were talking about the nod to the other books, and you guys will get this when you watch The Return, but like, it's its own thing. I don't know if it makes sense without the other parts, but the original show is just as different from Fire Walk With Me. That's just as different as The Return. That's just as different as the books. Jennifer Lynch, the diary book is its own thing. It works its own way. It's got its own language. It's Laura's own voice. It's her perspective. The Cooper tapes are a lot similar because it's kind of a diary journal thing. This is its own thing that doesn't have to depend on all the rules of all the other parts.
But doesn't it? Yeah. Or shouldn't it?
Well, no, because
canon is never a word that I use.
Basically, Mark Frost doesn't like canon. He doesn't like that term. He doesn't think that every single, all
so
the individual...
He doesn't like continuity or things making sense.
This actually explains a lot.
So he wants his fans to like torch his house and David Lynch him.
He wants walls with red yarn and pins going all over the place, connecting to photographs and documents and
they're all going in different directions.
But that's the thing. It's like, so in the original show, Laura gives Harold her diary before she dies, and it would have been a different day. That whole Laura giving Harold the pages, it doesn't line up in Fire Walk.
Anytime
I've thought about that
Martin Short shows up on screen, I'd check out.
I'd already grown to accept that timelines, days, these just aren't going to line up, and I don't have the energy to try and keep up with days of the week on a calendar and saying,
I would never do that, but I want it, like, it bothers me. It bothers me that it doesn't sync up in my head. Like,
kind of like what he says too about this, though. It's just like people misremember certain things.
But
information is
this is his information.
But Fire Walk With Me is not. That's the thing.
Right.
I talk about this in my Philip Jeffries video that you can't watch till after The Return either, but revisionism in Twin Peaks and how it's pervasive throughout all of it. And it starts in the original show, just the nature of extremely fast serial television writing in the late 80s. You got different writers, and then like in the pilot, they find a bloody towel at the crime scene. That's season 1 opener. Season 2 opener, Albert is recapping everything, and they find a bloody towel and 2 torn out pages of a diary. Those diary pages weren't mentioned in the first season, but they're opening the second season with it.
Yeah.
So, okay, this diary thing is going to be a thing now. The final episode of season 2, they're like, oh, I lost Wyndham Earl at Glastonbury Grove. Yeah. And Hawk goes, that's where I found the bloody towel and the 2 pages of the diary. Now, there's 2 missing pages of the diary and a bloody towel, and I guess they were found near this mystical place that we're about to go find out what it is. And I can't say any more until The Return. I don't know. Like, he is creating his own thing that exists on its own, but it's also tied to these other things, and all of these things as a whole or separately all have inconsistencies and or revisions in them. None of it's perfect. So he wrote that in The Secret History. Hey, maybe this is how memory works. This is how history works.
I think it's an extremely clever way to kind of fudge the missteps.
Exactly. He is writing in an explanation for missteps that might have been taken or inconsistencies that might have existed with this book as a historical document, because history is flawed, even recorded history.
Yeah. All right.
Sorry,
you're further increasing my argument for Twin Peaks being irresponsible.
I just want to grab some water. This might be, we're at another hour too, so it might be a good time to just, if anybody wants to grab a drink or anything.
Yeah, I'll get some more water as well.
Just want to let the dogs out.